the talk tonight, You Will Be Hacked, I've been thinking a lot about a song by R.E.M. called Everybody Hurts. And it's a song that I didn't like when it came out very much. It's a very whiny song, actually. But recently, listening to it again, I've become really intrigued. So let me just tell you a little bit about the song for those that are too young to know this song. It's not like any other song I've heard that I can think of. It's very long. It's about 5 minutes long. And for the first 4 minutes, it's essentially the lead singer of R.E.M., Michael Stipe, I guess. Is that right? Am I remembering right? Through the fog of childbirth. Not that I... yeah. I'll tell you all about it later. Saying over and over again, essentially, into quite sad music, that everybody hurts in a slightly whiny voice. And then, about 4 minutes into the song, suddenly the music swells up a bit and he starts saying, hold on, hold on. And then the song finishes. So it's a really strange sort of two-act song. And I'll talk about that at the end. So I just sort of wanted to flag it at the beginning. Here's a sad thing out of the video clip of the song. And the video clip's quite moving. Again, without really any commentary from outside. It's just a whole lot of people. We see them in a traffic jam looking sad, and we see their thoughts printed on the screen. And they're all having sad thoughts. And at one point, we see a quote from the Bible, from Psalms. Make it bigger. Appears. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And it's very beautiful language. I think what it means to me at least, is a rock higher than I is like a place of refuge. It's a safety. It's a thing that I can go to. Lead me there. Take me to a safe place. Higher than I is quite moving. It's somehow beyond what I can do. I need help. Take me to this safe place. So I think with cybersecurity, we're all looking for a rock. We're looking for that rock. And tonight, I just wanted to sort of talk about that journey we're on looking for the rock and talk about our chance of success and what I think we should do. My eyes are so poor that I have to get quite close to my slides to read them. I'm going to make them even larger. There we go. Yeah, a Hollywood blockbuster. If life was a Hollywood blockbuster, here's how cybersecurity would pan out. At the introduction of the film, we'd see the problem. There's cybersecurity, there's hackers, there's people being hacked, people being identity frauded, scams, so on and so on and so on. Various heroes would be introduced at various times. Someone would work out how to solve the problem. There'd be a few car chases, it'd be nail biting. It would look almost like they weren't going to make it. Then at the end, they would solve the problem, and then it would all be finished and the credits would roll. But life isn't like that. We're not going to have that in cybersecurity. We keep hoping for it and looking for it, but it will not be the case that we will find the solution and we will solve it. And it's really not what we want. We want to find a technical solution that will solve this problem. And this problem, and we've been looking now for 20 years, quite hard, and the problem just gets worse. And the more we fiddle with it, the worse it gets. So we're very not in a movie situation, and I'd like to talk about the sort of situation we are in. I said here we're looking for an ending. I think we're trying to find the end of the movie, and I don't believe there is an end to this movie. We haven't found an end yet. We've been looking hard. Keep calm and hack the planet. So, You Will Be Hacked. Here's what we meant by that sort of controversial title. By hacked, it's a word that's contentious at the moment, and everyone's trying to redefine it over the last week, but what I sort of meant playfully is you'll be a victim of 21st century crime. Your machines you're on will be compromised, machines you own will be compromised, or you'll be scammed, or you'll be identity frauded, or you'll be identity thefted, or you'll be impacted by an event, some sort of cyber-initiated event that has an impact on a range of people, or your data will be stolen, or your data will be changed, or your data will be compromised, or you will be blackmailed for your data, or your data will be ransomed, or you'll be surveilled without knowing it from your TV, or your doll, or your car, or your shoe, or you'll install software that's either malware or spyware or something I've called unexpected ware, which is the latest ware. We keep thinking of new wares, but somehow you'll install software that you think does one thing, and perhaps it will, but it'll do other things that you don't think it would do. And if you knew, you wouldn't want it. And you'll Trojan horse, essentially, you'll install yourself. You'll be impacted by a cyber attack. And the last thing is at the Warsaw summit in July, NATO was long anticipated they would, has declared that cyber is the fifth domain. So we have of warfare. So we have land, that's the armies, and we have sea, we've had those for a long time. Then air came more recently, that's the third domain. Decades ago, space became the fourth domain, and now cyber has just been officially declared the fifth domain. And it's pretty clear to everyone, I'm sure, in this room, that warfare has been happening in cyber for a while, and the potential for future warfare and impact in cyber is huge, and we will talk about that. So we can also be hacked or impacted by cyber crime or cyber attacks or cyber terror through nation states and through war. And just projecting the current growth rates in crime and the current impacts of all these individual things, it seems certain, well, it is certain that if these rates were to continue, that someone born today would be certainly hacked by the time they were 30. It's not the case that someone born today will be mugged or will have their house burgled. Many people will, but it is the case. These crimes are growing faster and in many cases already larger than traditional face-to-face crimes, that people will be affected by cybercrime, 21st century crime. So I'd like to talk about it a little bit forensically and analytically and sort of look at what's going on. Here's my long view. I don't think it's right to think about the cat and mouse game, to think, there's this problem and we'll patch it, and there's this problem, we'll patch it, and this problem, we'll patch it. And I don't think it's right to view security in that way. Operationally, that's what happens, but I think it's much more helpful and useful to take a longer view and think, what's the big picture of what's happening here? What are the trends that are underlying what's happening here? What's the shape of the future going to be? So here are some of the characteristics that the internet has and our connectivity has and our devices have that I think sort of bear on how the future is going to play out. First of all, everything is complex and the complexity is growing, and everything is powerful and the power is growing. So if we think back to early operating systems like MS-DOS, it could do very few things. You could copy a file from one diskette to another, you could print a file out, you could type a file, you could rename a directory, you could create a directory, all these things by typing commands. These things were quite banal, but if you look at what operating systems can do now, they can look up the date from an international date and time server, synchronize your clock, and automatically install updates, track your device if it gets stolen, listen to you talk and answer your questions, listen to you whisper to other people things that you don't want anyone to hear and relay it to their corporate owners. Operating systems now are it's not a little bit more than those old days of typing MV file.txt to file2.txt. It's not, we're not on a linear change here. The complexity and the power has grown astonishingly. Astonishingly, to be more precise, I think in a way that no one predicted. And if we read science fiction, even from the early days of PCs, I mean, William Gibson did a reasonable job, but if you go back to the really early days of PCs and people were sort of setting books set in the future, it's really fun these days to go back and forensically read those old science fiction texts to see what the most wacky, far-out science fiction writers thought the future would be and the power of computing would be. It is nothing like as wonderful as what it actually is. It's unbelievable what we've actually got. So absolutely, complexity and power is growing all the time, and I can't see that abating. Interconnectedness is growing, and that's something that's more recent than the growth and power of computing. We've found that by not only having more powerful computers, but by connecting computers together and connecting people together and connecting devices together, we're getting the network effect. We get incredible benefits that we hadn't contemplated that don't reside in any individual machine, no matter how powerful it is, but reside from the connection and interactions. And again, seems to be it's hard to see how that will slow down too. That seems a really a powerful characteristic of what we face now. There's this thing called too good to be true. And this is why I love being in computing, and all you who are students, former students or current students will sense this joy. It is so exhilarating to be doing computer science. And those of you who have come just out of interest and are just looking at the field from the outside, I wonder if you can sense it, that computing is the most ridiculously fantastic career to have, because more or less anything we dream or imagine we can make. And it can happen. And it can happen even better than we can hope. So the things that we can do with computers today are really too good to be true. I mean, do you sometimes think, is this really happening when you read about self-driving cars or national censuses that you don't have to fill in paper? These things, the benefits are so vast. And why that's relevant is the benefits are so vast that to gain more security, one easy way would be to roll back. We could just say, well, I don't want to, I mean, Mark, you sort of hinted at this. I don't want the super duper computer. I don't want to be connected to the internet. I don't want my phone constantly on. I don't want these things. And that would give us an increase. That would take us back to a day where the risks were smaller. But what we would give up is so good that I can't see people doing it. So it's this lovely tension that we're in now, that we're getting all these wonderful benefits, but at the same time, we're picking up there's a poison pill in there, but the poison pill's only little and the benefits are so good. And one really graphic thing is I'm quite interested in privacy, and for many years lied shamelessly whenever I filled in the government paperwork buying a SIM card so that no one would know who I was from my SIM card. I used stolen credit cards and all that sort of stuff. I hope this isn't being recorded. No. Complete joke. But I went to enormous lengths to never ever give true information about who I was when I got my SIM card. And I went through many SIM cards over the years. And then just recently, I was getting a SIM card from my provider, Goliath, and they said, you can have $10 a month off if you link this to your home phone. And I said, $10 a month? I'm in. And I just thought, wow, that was 10 years of careful work of never giving away my identity. How cheap am I? For $10 a month, I do it. So I just think there's this tension that we have to acknowledge exists there, that people can give us benefits laced with something and we'll knowingly eat the something because the benefits are so delicious. That's another characteristic. And the last thing is proximity. With the connectivity, we're now all proximate. So my daughter went overseas on an exchange. I could talk to her all the time. My brother went on an exchange when I was young. We got monthly postcards from him or letters from him or very expensive phone calls occasionally. People around the world now, I love MOOCs because I love education. People around the world now can learn. You don't have to be near a university. The first time I put a MOOC up, the first time I released any of my lectures, I got more letters from India than anywhere else in the world. And I was getting letters from people saying, you know, I've always wanted to go to uni, but I could never afford it. And my father made me, do rickshaws since I was young because I had to support my grandma and my mum and my sister. And I thought I would never get to, and now I'm doing university and it's free. And I just suddenly realized all the geographical and barriers that would be there normally for someone being able to access these benefits and services have disappeared. So this is the other characteristic, that somehow everything is available to everyone. I have to speak more quickly because we're going to run out of time and I don't want to. Oh, look at that. That is a murder scene. And MMO means, in my lame sort of way as to not giving away what the slide's about, if I'd been a better lecturer, I'd have had lovely slides that faded into each other and gradually built and things would have appeared to surprise you, but I've put it all up at once. So I've just used cryptic code so you won't be able to understand it till I explain. MMO is, well, you tell me, have I given it away? MMO. No, not massive, though that's a very good guess. Look at the picture. Murder. Modus operandi. Close. Close. Motive. Means. Opportunity. This is what all crimes need, according to Agatha Christie. Let's look at cybercrime. Let's start with opportunity. And all I've written for opportunity is ha. Because we're all proximate. We're all next to each other. I can rob anyone, not just people I'm near, not just houses I walk into. I can rob a poor rickshaw driver in India who's working really hard to stay, because he's next to me now. Everyone is next to everyone. So opportunity is everywhere. So the old murder mysteries in the future, if they were happening in the cyber world, would be sort of boring because they've really only got the MM. The O is everyone's got opportunity. That doesn't rule out any suspects. The first M is interesting, means. That's the technical one. How does cybercrime get carried out? What are the means? So for a normal murder mystery from Agatha Christie, it would be opportunity. Means would be I poisoned Great Aunt Beryl because I knew she was allergic to bees, so I poisoned her with bee venom. That's the means. The motive would be she looks really funny when she swells up, and The opportunity would be she was unobserved last Sunday, so I could sneak in and do it. All right, these are the things. So the means is like how you carry out the attack. Being technical people, we're all really interested in that. And there is a danger with cyber, I think, that we can get fixated on the means because it's so damn interesting how vulnerabilities work and exploits work. So let me just talk a little bit about the means for those of you who aren't in the land of cyber and are looking in, because it is quite fantastic. How do you disable a power station if you're a hacker? It's not the matter of going onto their website and clicking the button that says disable. It could be, but it probably isn't. To do these things, they normally haven't, the people setting up the system that is being attacked, haven't set it up with options to allow it to be attacked. It is attacked by exploiting the system in some way and making it do something it's unintended. And what we exploit, or what attackers exploit, I say we all the time, I'm not meaning I do this, is, but I'm trying to put myself in the mind of an attacker. That's really part of our education strategy here. We believe you can't defend unless you understand how an attacker thinks. And I'll just say something about that for 1 second, because that's such an important point. If you think like a defender, you fool yourself, because defenders look at their defenses and are so impressed by how good they are. So I have the best door. I spent $700 on that door. It's got a lock that's unpickable. I've learned all about lock picking. Put this special one on that had tumblers and rotators and da-da-da. And you focus on it and you say, we are impregnable. We have an unblemished record. There is no way that anyone can break into my house because I have the best door. That's how defenders think. They focus on the good points and they feel really good about them. But attackers focus on the weak points, of course. So the attacker won't go through that door. They'll go around the side window that's left open or the back door or something like that. So to be an attacker is you're always looking for weakness. To be a defender is you're always congratulating yourself on your strength. I think to be a good defender, you need to have the attacker mindset. So you look at what you've got and you're not distracted by the good things. You're hungry for the weaknesses. And seeing weaknesses in your own things is very hard, and that's a difficult mindset to get. How the means by which, say, a power station would be shut down or a nefarious cyber attacker would carry out their thing is they will find a vulnerability. They'll find something in the system that is able to be tweaked in an unusual way, and we call that a vulnerability. Now, most technical vulnerabilities that we know so far in the family of vulnerabilities we call memory corruption. So that's buffer overflows, heap overflows, all those various things like that. Now, memory corruption vulnerabilities, we're constantly finding, the attackers are constantly finding new ones. And then vendors are constantly trying to fix them. And there's this sort of cat and mouse game. And as soon as Microsoft think of a new way of randomizing the stack or making things non-executable, then the attackers find this and find that. And it's this cat and mouse game and so on and so on. And so on. But it actually looks to me from the outside like memory corruption is going to be a solved problem quite soon. Intel's doing all sorts of amazing things with it. There's lots of researchers around the world doing really clever things. Some of our former students from CSE, Thurston Dang, that some of you might remember, is over at Berkeley now doing amazing work. By improving compilers, by putting in runtime checks, by instrumenting code, by essentially doing things like Valgrind, but sort of building it into everything, by having things set up so the programmer doesn't have to look after the security, but the system does it for him or her, or the compiler does it for them. Setting things like that might actually starve memory corruption vulnerabilities, and they may disappear, like printf vulnerabilities have sort of disappeared. So it may be the case that in the future, this whole class of vulnerabilities, which is the main one exploited at the moment, like we're sort of saying it may be that all poisons and all bee venoms in the world will soon be gone. But I hope you can see that doesn't mean murder will stop. It just means perhaps that the murderers or evil people will find other ways of carrying out their crimes. And I think that is what's going to happen. And there's a lot of debate about this in the security community. And I believe, a good reason for thinking that. And let me try and explain that and see if I can convince you that although it's exciting that we will soon, I hope, put memory corruption errors to bed, vulnerabilities to bed, I don't think that is good night. So here is a comic that I really like. It's from, what's it called? Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, thank you, SMBC. This is what it's like to learn endocrinology. So 17 alpha hydrolase axon progesterone, which becomes 17 alpha hydroprogesterone, which can either get 21 hydroxylase to become 11 dexocortisol or get 1720 lase to become androstenedione. I'm confused. Oh, sorry, it's a little tricky at first, but I brought along this helpful diagram. The reason I think that solving memory corruption won't solve the whole thing is that there's a fundamental nature to what's going on in computing that led to memory corruption errors even happening in the first place. And the fundamental thing is one of those things we talked about at the beginning. It's complexity. Systems are complex. Systems are amazingly complex. And the problem is the complexity exceeds our ability to understand them easily. And as soon as one person cannot look at a whole chunk of code or a whole unit or a whole whatever and understand it in an intuitive, powerful, natural way, then there is possibility that hiding in that complexity are mistakes and errors. Now, anyone that's a programmer here, what I'm saying now is redundant. I don't have to say this because every programmer knows, forget about security, we can't even make our programs correct. So security is how your program behaves when it's put in when it's made to do incorrect things by a bad person. But even if there's no bad person, there's only good people, we still actually can't do it. And it's not even, it's a really profound thing that I think is a fundamental part of becoming a programmer that a lot of you probably remember from your first year of programming, that you have to come to terms with the fact that everything you do is wrong, everything you make is broken, there are mistakes in everything you do, and it can be very confronting and demoralizing, which can be, I think, one of the reasons it's hard to learn programming by yourself rather than in a supportive environment, because time after time after time you find, but I stuffed up, and you fix that, and hiding behind that error is another, and behind that is another, and there's a whole infinite series of turtles, all the way down of errors, and you can find them as much as you want. I've got some examples of this complexity, but can I just say, I believe that complexity is the main thing. That we build complex systems because they're so powerful and wonderful and too good to be true, and we want to have all those behaviors and properties. Because we are drawn like a moth to flame to embrace complexity, our reach will always exceed our grasp. We will always build systems that are too complex to fully understand, and if we don't fully understand things, then there is a way that a diabolical person can look at it and find a way through, a way around, a hack. And we know this in law. Laws are relatively simple and people can tweak and scrape through the laws. You probably know this from playing card games with relatively simple rules. I'm sure some of you have still worked out ways of, I can always win by exploiting this and that and the other. So even in relatively simple systems, we see that as soon as the complexity reaches a certain level, we can't deal with it. Now, how am I going for time? Who has a watch? 6:23. 6:23. And what time are we finishing? 2 minutes. We are going to sing the remainder of the talk. Is it 40? Is that right? Oh, perfect. Oh, perfect. Oh, we've got heaps of... Oh, we can go slow. Let's... I just want to talk about complexity because I just was trying to work out how much time I had to talk about it. To me, complexity is everything. If I can convince you, or if you start to appreciate this complexity is not a passing fad, it's not something we can solve, it's not something that we just can't, we don't have the right processor or the right software methodology, or we're not quite smart enough, or we need to start STEM in primary school rather than high school. I just want you to see that complexity will continue to explode, and as we get more power, instead of using it to simplify, we use it to create more complexity. And as we work out better ways of working together, rather than using the extra people to check what we're doing, we work out ways we can leverage to build more and more powerful teams, to do more and more powerful things. This complexity is what undoes us every time. And the second half of the talk, which I call Hold On, is how we then deal with the fact that we're living in this world where there is inevitable complexity, there will be inevitable vulnerabilities. And so what shall our response be? There will be no Hollywood ending. There will never be a day where you wake up and go, finally, like smallpox, computer errors have gone forever. They will be growing more and more all the time. So let me just say a little bit more about complexity, because if I can convince you on that, I think that we're in. So examples about complexity. First of all, bugs. Computer scientists, computer programmers call the things that go wrong in their programs bugs. Does anyone know, and this is a trick question because some of you will know, we'll call it out and I'm going to say you're wrong. Does anyone know why we call them bugs? No, I'm not even going to, because it'll be mean. Because you'll say, in an early machine there was a bug and it caused a memory, and that may be true. But that probably is true, actually. But I'm interested in a deeper reason why that name stuck. That's a good reason for using that name, but why did someone the next day not say, well, let's still just not call them bugs? It's silly, even though I understand. Yes. You say it together.
To make us feel better that we made them.
Yes.
Displaying responsibility.
Yes, yes, two perfect answers. Are you guys from UNSW?
Yeah.
That's good. That's exactly right. To make them sound trivial, to make them sound like a living object that's beyond our control, to make them sound like a funny little thing. What we really should say is, not my program had a bug. We should say my program was thoroughly wrong. My program was erroneous. What I did was wrong. All my work today had mistakes in it. But we call it bugs. It's sort of cute. You don't feel so offended. So all software has bugs. Is anyone here as a programmer? This is an interesting question. Has anyone ever written any program that, I mean, it's got to be a program, not just a line of shell code or something like that, that didn't have a bug?
I have.
Yes?
I have once, and I remember it. I compiled it.
You got to hold on to that day. That is the perfect day. Yeah.
It made an image.
Yes.
The image had a circle of like a red circle.
Okay. All right. That's fantastic. And did I see another hand here?
Self-4 microkernel. The self-4 microkernel.
Well, you wrote the microkernel and it worked?
It's an example.
If anyone ever does that, you know, all other programs are just in awe and so impressed for you and happy for you that you've done that. We really are, we just know, no matter how smart we are, no matter how well we understand programming, no matter how good our teams are, our programming language, how many years we've done at university, we will still make mistakes because what we're trying to do with our programs, we have this vision, this dream we're trying to solidify, it's beyond our grasp. Our reach is beyond our grasp. And so we have to iterate towards it, slowly removing the bugs, as many as we can find. The great example of that I have is binary search. And if any of you have been my student before, you'll have heard this, so I'm sorry. But it's a famous one. In fact, probably most of you know it already if you're computer scientists. There's a great guy, John Bentley, who wrote a really good book called Programming Pearls, which everyone should read if you haven't read it. Even if you're not a computer programmer, it's an interesting book. Because it's sort of about the beauty of programming, seeking for a code that is beautiful, not just code that's correct. So he wrote this book, and he's a great guy. He was a lecturer at CMU, I think. And he's very famous for having given a class where he got all his really smart, slightly arrogant perhaps, CMU students, best uni in the world, we must be the best students in the world type people to come along. I'm only building them up because we're about to tear them down. Actually, they're probably really lovely people and things like that. But they came along and he asked them all to write a simple program which everyone understands, which is a simple operation called binary search. And anyone that's done any computer science knows binary search. In fact, I reckon you probably all know binary search anyway, because we do it with games like 20 questions or things like that. So if you say, you don't say, you've got 20 questions, I'm thinking of a thing. Wait, ask me a question, Wilson. I'm thinking of something, you've got 20 questions.
Alive or dead?
Is it alive or dead? He didn't say, is it that coat? That would have been a perfectly legitimate question. And if I'd said yes, he would have got the answer. But if I'd said no, he would have only ruled out a little bit of all possible answers. And so the best question to ask is, regardless of whether I say yes or no, if we could sort of rule out half of the possible answers. So I'm trying to guess a word you're thinking of. Is the first letter in the first half of the alphabet, or is it in the second half of the alphabet? That sort of question. So yeah, is it? Well done. So binary search is exactly that. Binary means split in two. So binary search is you split in half, then you split in half, and you split in half. And it turns out to be very fast and efficient. It's a very simple algorithm for doing it. And it is notoriously hard to write correctly. And it's notoriously largely because of John Bentley, who once observed that he'd never met anyone who'd been able to code it correctly. And he challenged his class of CMU students to then and there in the class write a binary search algorithm, a program. And they all did, and then he picked one at random, and the class had great fun at dissecting it and finding all the mistakes in it. And I imagine he iterated, and my understanding of the story is that they couldn't find a single one that was correct. And certainly to be mean, once I was teaching binary search and there was a lecturer wandering by and I called him and said, "Oh, I say," it was a bit mean. It was Tim Lambert. Does everyone remember Tim? He's a lovely guy. I said, "Tim, would you mind just writing up an implementation of binary search while I'm teaching it to the students?" It was very mean because I knew that he would make a mistake. And he is so smart. Anyone that knows Tim knows how incredibly smart he is. But even in that simple thing like binary search, the amount of complexity you have to think about to deal with the edge cases is so great that we just can't get it right, and everyone gets it wrong. Anyway, here's the funny thing about that story. At the end of giving the class, John Bentley then went through and gave them a correct implementation of binary search and mathematically proved that it was correct. And this was a class talking about how to prove that things were correct. And he created a correct program. And it went down in history and it's really famous. And one of his students, Josh Block, famous for Java, years later wrote an article, I think 2005 or so, wrote an article saying, actually, that code that I saw when I was a student of John Bentley's 2 decades ago for binary search, I've just realized it has an error in it. And it was published in this beautiful book, Programming Pearls, and it had been sitting there. The whole world had been looking at this correct version of binary search, and no one had ever noticed that bug. And the only reason that Josh Block discovered the bug was he wrote that version of binary search to put in java.utils.binary search. It was a library call, and someone's code 20 years later crashed because of this bug. They reported the bug to Josh. He looked through, found it, and was so ashamed. So even the thing that the professor was putting down as an example of code that didn't have the bug, I've got it here for any coders, anyone that doesn't know. I should have had it up behind me the whole time. Can you see it? Or is it too faint? It's probably too faint. You can just Google it and look it up. But while I'm talking, just see if you can spot the bug. You got it already?
Yeah, so
Oh, no, don't tell everyone. Did you work it out yourself? I'm so impressed. What's your name?
Caleb,
Oh, I know your name.
8 years ago.
Oh, wow. Wow. Are you going to come and say hello at the
You
end?
didn't know my name when I was tutoring for you.
My brain is like a goldfish bowl. I'm a goldfish. But I do remember your name, Caleb, and that's amazing. Wow. Wow. Okay. So Caleb, I'm sure, has it. But the point of this exercise, in addition to hopefully giving you a fun puzzle to solve, is I just want you to realize that complexity can daunt us all. No matter how good we are, complexity is there. So anyone writing code will introduce bugs in the code. There's just no way of escaping that. And worse than bugs, they'll make vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities have a bad consequence, possibly worse than bugs. And the last example I wanted to give, how am I going for time now, Brad?
15.
15 minutes to go. All right, I don't have time to give the last example. So we'll move on. And the last one was, what have we got? Opportunity means motive. Yeah, who cares? Because there's 4 billion people that can attack you. It doesn't really matter what the motive of the person attacking you is anymore. They might be attacking you because they're hacktivists. They might be attacking you because they hate you. They might be attacking you because they just randomly... It doesn't matter. Because there's so many potential attackers, its motive is now irrelevant, really. All that's relevant is if you have a vulnerability, they will come. Really, this is my basis for believing cybercrime is unstoppable, or hacking more generally is unstoppable, that everyone has perfect opportunity. There are an infinite number of attackers. Let me say motive. Let me say a little bit about motive. Although it's a who cares, back before the year 2000, motive actually was a serious concern. Because there was no point really in hacking anyone. There wasn't much you could do. Maybe you could write rude comments about them on their bulletin board or delete the recipes that they were storing on their TRS-80 or something like that. But in terms of impacting the world or making a physical difference other than just glory and giggles, there was no reason to attack someone except to show you could. But from about 2000 on, when Microsoft Money was around and internet became connected to banks and money and banking, suddenly compromising a machine gave you access to money. And now we trade on the machines, and the machines control dams and power stations and pacemakers and cars, and have all your records and your photos, and have a camera in your house and a mic. And so suddenly now there's a million motives for possibly doing it. In the old days when there was no motive, there wasn't much cybercrime, there wasn't much hacking, and it was mainly done by these self-taught teenagers who were just doing it for fun. But now it's done by criminals and by nation states, because the impact of doing a hack now is a significant thing in the real world. Money or power or just physical impact is now possible. So motive now is anything you want. And these 3 things are my reason for thinking that cybercrime is with us forever, and we will never be able to stop it. We just have to deal with it sensibly. So what do we mean by sensibly? That's the second part of the talk. Oh, here's a quote from Wesley. "There's no such thing as perfect cybersecurity, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something." So if you ever hear someone say, "This system is perfect, this system is safe, don't worry, trust us, everything's okay, everything's good," they're saying something wrong. And not only are they saying something wrong, they're telling you something about them. They're revealing they don't understand what's going on. I don't know if anyone ever saw the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Ark of the Covenant was discovered in this film, and it was turned out to be, amongst other things, a weapon of unimaginable power and potential destruction. And at the end of the film, the Ark of the Covenant's been boxed up and taken off by US government officials. And Harrison Ford says, "Well, where is it? You know, we've rescued the Ark, where is it? We need to analyze it. This is an incredibly, potentially dangerous thing. Mankind needs to understand this, and we need to be able to have people analyzing it, and we need to work with it, and we need to make sure it doesn't wipe out all of mankind. Perhaps it can be used for good. You know, we need access to this thing to study and learn and appreciate it." And the person, I don't know if you remember the scene, says, "Don't worry, we've got top men working on it." "Just go away, Harrison. You're out of the picture. We've got top men working on it." And Harrison said, "What? What? Who? Who?" And they say, "Top men." And that's more or less the end of the film. And my wife and I do that as a joke. Whenever anyone stands up on TV and they say, "Oh, we're worried about this system. Is your system secure? Can you do this?" And they go, "Don't worry about it. We're great. I've got, you don't have to worry. We've got an unblemished record. This is fantastic. It's unattackable. It's perfect." We just look at each other and go, "Top men." Okay. So, second half of the talk, but it's much shorter. The first part of the talk went for 4 minutes. This only goes for 1 minute. This is the hold on part of the talk. Is it depressing, this view that there is no magic bullet? There is no magic solution to cyber security problems. There's no way that we will ever stop hacking. Is it depressing? I don't actually think it's depressing. I actually think it's a little bit exhilarating. I like the way the world is more complex than we can deal with. I would hate to live in a boring universe where everything could be understood. I love it that the complexity that things introduce leads to new complexity, that anyone that knows Gödel's theorem, that systems, our ability to prove things is not as good as our ability to discover things. The truth escapes proof. I really love that it is a crazy place like that we live in. I think it makes the world really beautiful and wonderful. So it's not depressing, but it's significant. It is something we need to think about and react to. The thing I like to think about is cities. Cities are really good, and we wouldn't want to go back to living on the land. There are all these benefits from being in cities, but nonetheless there's more traffic accidents in cities. So there are risks associated with being in cities. But the way to solve traffic accidents isn't, and I know this is sacrilegious, to build super duper high computer powered cars that will never crash into anyone, because that's not going to work. Maybe they'll crash into less people, but we'll never build a car that won't crash into anyone. We'll never solve people being hit by cars. As long as there's cars, it will, perhaps for reasons beyond the car's control, there will be people being hit by cars. So the important thing really isn't to give up or get depressed. It's to say, isn't it wonderful living in cities? Isn't it nice having cars? Isn't it good we're doing lots of things to make the cars as safe as possible? But we pedestrians need to actually teach our children, understand cars, walk around defensively and so on. There's an onus on everyone, not just on the leaders and the engineers who build the cars, but on everyone to work well in this system. So the risk, which we will never get rid of, can still be put into manageable levels, and the reward is significantly, it's worth the reward that we get for doing it. So going forward, what's the world going to look like? What could the world look like? What should we do? How should we live? That sort of question. We could build secure systems, but we'd have to build them without power. We'd have to build them not complex. We'd have to make them very simple. And I was thinking, we can build buildings that don't fall down. You know, modern buildings fall down all the time. The pyramids are awesome, and they've been here for so long. I understand they're more BC than we are AD. But they're built, you have to build something that when it collapses has the same shape as when you built it to get that sort of longevity. It takes a whole nation and one person lives inside, or their family. You know this. So you'd go back a long way. You give up a lot of things if you're going to build buildings like that. You could make computer programs like that and they wouldn't have vulnerabilities in them, probably. But what would we have? We wouldn't have anything that would be fantastic. I wouldn't be able to talk to my daughter on Skype when she's overseas in another country. How should we go forward? How do we live in this world? I think there are three groups of people that we have to think about in terms of working out how to go forward. One is security engineers, one is our leaders, and one is all citizens. Now, Brad, could you tell me when I've only got 5 minutes to go? I've only got 5 minutes to go? Yep. I really regret asking that question. Damn. Okay, I'm going to say this really quickly. All right, security engineers, very important. The important thing here in the conjunction of the two words, I think the approach for the people that design and build these systems and maintain them, the responsible people whose job it is to make things so they are as risk-free as possible, is an engineering approach. And that's the UNSW approach, and anyone who's come from UNSW knows we talk about it ad nauseum. I really believe that's the right way to go. I don't think security's ever solved in the long run by finding a problem and fixing it, and finding a problem and fixing it, and finding a problem and fixing it. That's dabbling or tinkering. You don't build bridges that way that don't fall down. How you build bridges is you become a civil engineer and you learn engineering principles, and you learn about feedback, and you learn about testing, and you learn about skepticism, and you learn about peer review, and you learn about best practice, and you learn about standards, and you learn about monitoring, and you learn about all the things it is to be a professional engineer. And they're the skills we need in security, and we don't have them at the moment. Possibly because a lot of the security people in the industry who are so good at the moment were from this self-taught pool, the sort of hackers, the outsiders of society, who are now the table furniture in all these really powerful buildings. These people perhaps didn't become engineers and things like that because, you know, they were reckless people outside of society almost, and good on them for doing that. But we really need to produce engineers to do this, I think, and we need to produce them at scale. So security engineering is what we try and teach here, and everyone always says, oh, we should call our degree cyber security, but that sort of means the hacky thing. I want us to be security engineering, so that's why you always see that name, though sometimes cyber still slips into our marketing. I wanted to capture what it was to be a security engineer. We've got all these thoughts about it, and we're trying to do all these things with the support of the bank. With only 5 minutes to go, I can't. But let me just give you one graphic example, and some of you have probably seen this already. This is the Lancaster bomber, and you may or may know not the story, but in the Second World War, battle for air supremacy, Battle of Britain or just before, very important. Whoever had air supremacy essentially had a whole lot of power in this war and could control shipping routes and so on and so on and so on. The Germans and the Brits were each fighting it out. They were destroying planes faster than they could build them, so they each had a rapidly dwindling supply. And the British Air Force was desperately trying to work out how they could keep their planes in the air and still fighting and still bombing and still doing all that stuff, how they could keep their air supremacy. So they engaged a mathematician, which is always a good thing to do. And they said to him, brilliant man, but I don't have time to tell you anything about him, though there's lots of funny stories. They said to him, can you work out, we're going to armour these planes. We're going to put armour on them so they don't get shot down by the shrapnel. But the problem is the armour weighs so much that if we completely armour the plane, it can't take off. Does that sound familiar? Because that's sort of like security. If you make it completely good, you've built a pyramid and it's no good for anything, but it's safe. So they said, we can only put armour on some parts of it. Which parts should we do? And for me, that's security engineering. You have to identify which are the key things, the most important things to protect, because you can't protect everything. And he said, well, being a mathematician, let's gather data, or being a scientist, I guess, or an engineer. Let's gather data. So he gave pictures, cut out pictures of the planes to all the airdromes. And when the planes landed, he got someone to draw little dots wherever there was anti-aircraft fire or machine gun, wherever the fuselage or the parts of the planes that were damaged when they landed. He wanted to record which parts were most damaged, where the Germans sort of were firing at, that sort of stuff. So he gathered this data. I think most planes weren't hit. Those that were hit on average twice. So they would produce a composite picture for each base. So here's a mock-up. It's not real. But a composite picture that someone might send in from one of the Air Forces saying, here are all the bullet holes that we got last night on the Lancasters when they landed. Now, you guys, being a security engineer, I don't want you to call out the answer, though I reckon Caleb probably knows it. Looking at this picture, where would you put the armour? Don't call it out. Just think. This is the million-dollar question. This is being a security engineer. Look at this picture. Where would you put the armour? And the answer, I'm going to ask you, Caleb, because I reckon you might know.
Okay, well, the plane flew back with those bullet holes. You put the armour where?
So good. These are the planes that made it. So where you see lots of bullet holes, it doesn't matter. Does it make sense? Brilliant. Well done. Security engineering. Now I want to talk about leadership in my remaining... We're nearly there. I'm so close to the end. You can probably sense it. I just want to say something about leadership because I think it's important. Then I'll say something very briefly about you, and then I'll stop and you can ask lots of questions. Leadership, I think we need leadership in security. At the moment, we have worldwide, I'm not talking about Australia in particular, this is something that happens everywhere, a sort of paternalistic notion of security. We say, sometimes people call it the M&M approach to security. M&Ms have a hard shell on the outside, those of you that don't know what an M&M is. But inside, it's all delicious and soft. And the idea is, maybe one way of approaching security is you have a hard exterior, which is your barrier, your protection, your, your membrane. And then on the inside, everything can be gooey and unprotected. And the idea is maybe we have the government or the military or someone create a shell around everything. And then inside, we live in a bubble and everything's safe and we don't need security and everything's good. And we just need to make sure the outside is good. That's a really old notion of security. And anyone here that it works in security knows that just doesn't work. Because the people will penetrate the outside or the people on the inside will become bad and they're on the inside with you, like those horror movies, when you lock all the doors and you turn around and, oh no, you're the zombie. So what we don't want, I think, in leadership is leaders that say, don't worry, it's okay, everything's under control, and then they put all their experts into protecting the outer shell, and the citizens are kept in blissful ignorance, happy, voting, blissful ignorance, because we actually need the citizens to know about what's going on and things need to be openly discussed because the outer shell will be pierced because there will be mistakes and errors and vulnerabilities in it and people on the inside will go bad. So we really want leaders who, I believe, involve everyone and never say top men or never say, don't you worry about that. We really need to have actual sensible discussions. And the last thing is the Challenger. I won't show you the video. I actually watched it just before the talk and I vowed I wouldn't show it. It actually makes me cry to watch. The Challenger space shuttle. Here's the CNN live footage of it. But you probably all know the Challengers took off and exploded and killed the crew on board, including a kindergarten teacher or a lady teacher who was doing it. And it was a tragedy because not only did people die, but people died completely unnecessarily. It was a tragedy of leadership. The people at NASA had flipped from being a safety-oriented organisation run by engineers to a commercial organisation run by lobbyists and managers. And they had made a series of disastrous, irresponsible, unforgivable errors and shortcuts which led to all these people dying. And you can read all about it in Richard Feynman's amazing dissenting report when he reported on this. But the main thing to notice that I wanted to draw out of this is, in that report, Feynman notices the following thing. He says, I asked the people in charge of the space shuttle, the managers and the leaders and the people making the decisions whether to launch or not and all those people, what was the chance of a catastrophic failure killing someone? And they all said it was 1 in 100,000. But they couldn't tell me why it was that. And so I just went and I asked all the engineers. I went round and I just gave them bits of paper and asked them to anonymously write down what they thought the chance of a fatal catastrophe was. And they gave me numbers between 1 in 50 and 1 in 200. There was a later estimate that the actual chance of an error was fatality was about 1 in 100. I don't know if that's a definitive number, but that was like a ballpark number. So I just want to compare 1 in 100 from the engineers to 1 in 100,000 from the managers. So the managers used to say, don't worry, this is safe. We have an unblemished safety record. We will never have a shuttle exploding. Nothing will ever go wrong. Trust us. You don't need to question us. Everything's okay. But really what everyone should have been doing is listening to the engineers. And those of you who are engineers probably know what I'm about to say. What should those engineers have been doing? Yeah, they should have been speaking out. This is really our professional responsibility as engineers. It's a bit almost like global warming. People know the truth and then they grumble that others don't know the truth. For heaven's sake, everyone knew the truth about the ABS. Who spoke out? No one spoke out. Very few people did, and they were called nutters. We really needed everyone to speak. There were some whistleblowers. But we need, when people stand up and say, there is nothing to worry about, we have an unblemished record, we need everyone, engineers, rather than rolling our eyes and laughing and going top men to their wives, we need them writing into the newspapers, writing to people, complaining. This is what it is to be an engineer. We have a professional responsibility to society and to our profession. So that's my little chastisement. And I'm no better than the rest, okay? And last thing I wanted to say in my... I hope you're managing the time. Yeah. Every citizen needs to do something. And this is, again, like being a pedestrian, I think. Everyone needs to self-educate themselves. The world is changing and it has changed. And you probably thought, we all thought, why I don't need to learn anything when I finish my last uni course or finished high school. Thank heavens for that. That's my last exam. Now I don't have to, I can just consume and die. But no. Annoyingly, we have to keep learning, and everyone needs to learn. Your grandparents, your parents, your children, your uncles, your cousins. The whole world is changing in cyber. It's all new. No one knows it. No one understands it. Everyone needs to. It can't be that we just trust our politicians and we grumble and complain and find scapegoats when things go wrong. It is upon us all to learn and understand to the extent that we can and appreciate these risks. So I suggest that everyone do every method they possibly can to become across. And I know I've seen so many people trying to learn computers when computers came and people were old, and that's really admirable. Well, now cyber security is the next thing, and we all need to have more knowledge of it, and it's on to us to do that. We can't be complacent. And I finally am finishing with the phrase, children, the hope of the future. My thought, because I think about this a lot, how can we actually help the people understand this? And my solution, my potential solution that I'm fooling around with at the moment is, I reckon we just need to teach high school kids and primary school kids, because they are often IT support for their parents and their grandparents. And I think that would be a wonderful way of looking after the future if we somehow, and we don't just teach them that, all that safety online stuff that was sort of last millennium, which we're really good at teaching, I'm sure. We teach them skepticism and cons and scams. And I'm hoping to go out to Homebush soon and do this. We're going to get them to scam each other. And you don't learn about scams by someone talking about them and drawing diagrams. You learn about scams by doing them and suddenly realize you learn to be an defense by attack, I always believe. So I think we need to train all our children to be really skeptical, and I hope they will educate and lift us all, and they really are our future. So in summary, it's not grim. Everything is tough. But we need to hold on. We need our leaders and our business leaders to be a rock higher than ourselves. We need our engineers to be a rock higher than ourselves. If you're an engineer, you need to be a rock for everyone else. If you are a parent, you need to be a rock for your children. And if you have parents, you need to be a rock for them. This is what I think. Thank you very much. I'm feeling so sad for those people at the census now. They are lovely statisticians. They are top world-ranking statisticians. The ABS does such an incredible job. In my old former life, I used to do a lot of financial work and used to rely on the ABS. They were incredible. They do such a national service and they're fantastic. They're just not cyber experts and they're not privacy experts. They're statistical experts. I think what's happening with the ABS now is that they are a scapegoat. I'm really frightened about what's going to happen to those people. Because here's the thing, the system they built, I'd say there's enough evidence now to say that it's manifest that it was inadequately designed from a security point of view. And I'm not just talking about the collection system. It seems the whole thing didn't have a security engineering approach to it. That was true before the denial of service attack happened. That was true at the time that everyone was saying, don't worry, everything's okay. All that happened is they were unlucky and someone did a denial of service attack that showed that the system wasn't right. And 9 times out of 10 that wouldn't have happened, and we'd have had a flawed system and just not known it. And we'd still be in the land of don't worry, everything's all right. For me, the shocking thing is not these poor people did something beyond their capability and they got caught out by bad luck. It's that around the whole system, there wasn't an expectation that security would be done properly. It wasn't done properly. And then we weren't honestly told the quality of the security. That we were lucky that it was caught out. They were unlucky. But we probably might not have been caught out. Those shuttles were launching. Many shuttles launched with those bloody O-rings and no one died. But every time they launched, it was a crime. It's just they were unlucky that one time. It's not that one time was bad and all the other times were good. They just got caught out, and they may never have been caught out. That was a political decision to make the solid fuel into different segments, and then they had to be joined together with the O-rings. That was because they wanted to make it in another state far away from the launch, and there was no way of transporting the whole thing for entirely political reasons. They'd made them in the same state. It could have been a single unit. We wouldn't have had the O-ring. So the thing is a crime, I would say. It's a failure of leadership in the example of the Challenger. And you are just, when you take a risk, that's the bad thing. If you're unlucky and get caught out, that's just luck. It's the risk that's the bad thing. Taking a risk that you haven't allowed for and haven't properly dealt with in an engineering way. It's fine to take, you've got to have some risk. It's fine to have risk, but they've got to be sensibly thought out, evaluated and appropriately managed risks.
I think the response was appropriate though. I mean, they seemed to shuffle around from department to department. They didn't have a clear picture for a long time what was going on.
Look, I just feel sorry for everyone. How would any of us have reacted? They must have just felt sick. They wouldn't have had any sleep. They've been thinking so long about running a good census. You know, I just think, I'm sure things could have been done better in the reaction, but I don't think the reaction was, I mean, to me, that's not the big thing. That's what will be made the big thing, I think, probably, because we need a scapegoat. You know, to me, it was how did we get to that situation? That's the problem. Yes?
From a social and a political standpoint, what do we do between now and when we get the kids to become security engineers?
Yeah.
Help the politicians, and if you don't mind, I can probably tell them from the U.S., just not to pick on them one
Yes.
politician, but Hillary Clinton has had some problems with her email servers.
Yes.
And the Democrats were hacked at the convention.
Yes.
It's the attitude that worries me when she says, when she was asked about this, did you clean your hard drive? Did I wipe it with a cloth? And she thought it was funny. And so the humor suggests to me
Yes.
that she's sort of looking down on the computer science people. And it's, oh, you know, that's a joke from 20 years ago. You
Yeah.
laugh at, but today
Yeah.
you can't laugh at that.
From Zoolander.
What do we
Yeah.
do with that?
That's a really good question. I mean, so I've got two answers. One is, if you're lucky, Trump will get in. Look, I think that's a really serious problem. I don't know the answer to that. Cyber is so significant, but it's really only the people that are close to it or that have been impacted by it that realize how significant it is. It's like the Barrier Reef. Okay, we've got this beautiful reef. I've not seen it yet. It will be gone soon. Maybe even in my life, most of its beauty will be gone. We slowly kill it through slightly risky activities we do, but we don't know how, you know, I mean, we sort of know that it's a problem, but I think the people that dive and go to the reef every day and see it every day, to them, this is probably a burning passion and they're doing things about it. I just think about it and feel a little bit sad, then I don't change anything. So I don't know socially how to bring about change. I wish I did. But I do think crowds now, I think the wonderful thing about the internet is it has given power to individuals to have a voice. It's given us a way of speaking. I think one way of bringing about change is just a lot of people speaking rather than sitting back and being cross with the leaders but themselves. But yeah, look, I don't know the answer to that. But I've got to say the other thing is you should be proud too that you're from the US, because the US probably does cyber better than just about anyone, perhaps except for Israel.
Like the NSA.
Yeah. Well, no. I for one welcome our new overlords. Because you have mandatory data breach disclosure laws. So when a company is hacked and data is lost, in most states now I think, I don't know if it's federally mandated, but California brought it in a long time ago. Just for those that don't know, in America if a system's hacked and data is stolen, credit card numbers, identifiable numbers, but they're required to report it essentially to the stock exchange, which means it makes an impact at the boardroom, which means it's embarrassing, which means that about the time California brought in those breach disclosure laws, suddenly everyone shifted from trying to hide breaches and pretend they didn't happen to trying to fix and prevent them. And you are years ahead of everyone else because you've had, almost a decade probably of trying to genuinely deal with problems. In Australia, we're still in the land of if there's a problem, it's probably best not to bring it up because it might impact on the share price and things. Not all organisations. The ABS, to their credit, have had a couple of data breaches and they've reported them all and they're not required to. So, good on you. The US is ahead of us. Maybe I should be asking you what you think. Anyway, thank you very much and welcome. Okay, yeah. Yes?
Okay, here.
Thank you. Richard, I don't want to harp on the ABS problem, but it is the example du jour. Let's talk about it. One of the problems was that there was a company called IBM who was trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
And it indicates to me that at least part of the security problem is in fact the computing industry itself. the computer industry is creating the problem because they're competing with each other, trying to sell stuff and overselling and under-delivering. They're creating the problem as much as they, or perhaps even more, than they are solving the problem. So the devil is somehow from within rather than from without.
Yeah,
That
look,
worries me.
thank you. I think about the same things myself. I was surprised, because I hold IBM in really high regard. I was really surprised to hear that it happened. I think one of the problems behind the situation we're in is at the moment security is a cost and risk is invisible. So when the risk goes wrong and you're unlucky, it's visible and everyone's cross. But other than that, if you ramp up the risk between this level and that level, no one can see. Risk is just invisible. And so if you're in a cost-driven environment, then it must be very morally tempting to slip in extra risk to reduce cost. Yeah, and we have the same problem in software design too, when you are happy to write less quality code that will be less maintainable. You know, this is invisible to the outside world when you deliver the gear.
And I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
Back in the 1970s when I was
Yeah.
a programmer, we wrote good code.
Yes.
And we,
I've seen some of your code, I like it.
but we took the time and we took the trouble. Today, I would not be allowed to spend as much time as I did to write the code that I did because it wouldn't be cost effective.
And so
That's
this
the
is
problem.
this is a really important point.
And that's a
So,
real problem.
and I do have one thought about that, which is my dream for the future is that computing will one day become a profession. And we computer programmers will be professionals in the same way that doctors and lawyers are. So at the moment, we're sort of guns for hire. Many people are acting professionally, but there's nothing to stop a self-taught person just opening up a shop and running a business and selling shonky web software and, you know. I would like it to be that when someone says I'm a computer scientist or a programmer, they say I'm somehow a certified programmer or something. And it means the same as I'm a chartered accountant or I'm a doctor or I'm a lawyer. It means they belong to a professional organisation, such as the Australian Computer Society, which I really support for that reason. It means that they meet professional standards, they have a notion of what it is to be a professional, and they accept that they have a duty to the profession and society as well as a duty to their employer and money. For me, I don't think this problem is big enough to be, I think it's too big to be solved by an individual. No one person can say, forget it, boss, I'm writing quality code. I know it needs to ship tomorrow, but I want it to be. You just can't do that in an organisation. You'll get ground down. But if all computer programmers together say that, and there are standards and so on, and we become a profession with the power of a profession, then we can, as a profession, say that, I think. So that might be one way of dealing with that.
He's hoping.
Yes. Hello.
Hey, Richard.
Hi.
So, similar to the question you say, the risk is invisible.
Yes.
As citizens, we are not really concerned with security because, you know,
Yes.
oh, it's probably over there, but we don't care about it because, yeah. So how do we bring everyone else that we know, you know, our parents and all,
Yes.
to be more security conscious?
It's funny, isn't it? Until bad things happen, it's hard to appreciate what the risk is. I can think of flippant ways of answering that, but I won't give them. I think that's a really interesting question, and the person that has to answer that is you. And as a teacher, I always think this is really important, that my job is not to actually do any of the hard work. It's just to give you the homework. So hopefully the fact even that you're asking that question now means that you think it's important. And in this room full of wonderful people who probably have many more social skills than I do, hopefully you'll now all be trying to work out yourself, how can I persuade this person? How can I persuade that? I don't know the answer to that, but I know it needs to be done. So I think that's a great question. So thank you.
Richard,
Yes.
can we take one from Twitter?
Yes.
Excellent. Big one.
Oh.
Do you believe security and privacy can coexist?
Oh, privacy's hard. So I don't think we can ever have perfect security. I don't believe we can ever have perfect privacy. There's always going to be trade-offs. Privacy's harder than security, I think. And I'm actually less optimistic about privacy than I am about security, because when security goes wrong, everyone suffers and everyone can see that it's a loss. And if people die or lose money or are scammed or are sad or date someone who's not a real person or whatever, all those things you can see are bad. And once you've explained them to people, they can see are bad. Privacy is, so there's a tension with normal security that the companies want to do something cheaply and take risks, but the consumers get hurt by them taking the risks and don't want it. And there's this natural tug of war, and there's a marketplace, and maybe we'll find an equilibrium, and that's all good. And governments have an incentive to intervene, and that's all good. With security, with privacy, it seems to me to be unbalanced. The players are the government, the companies, and the individuals. The government have every reason to get as much data on us as possible to do their job well. So it's very clear their incentive is to get as much data as possible. And that's completely understandable, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's very clear that companies can make a lot of money if they know data from us. Everyone's doing that now. I was reading about someone who makes, there's apps, you probably were reading it today if you're just browsing around, apps that track periods. So people can track when they're going to have a period on these apps. And that data is now being sold to the people that use those apps because it's actually worth money to work out who's trying to have a baby or who's trying to do this. And you just think, what? So I think all data, cars are now telemetried and report data back. That data is now really valuable data, and Volkswagen and other companies are now putting more telemetry in cars so they can get more data on their drivers that they can sell and use for various things. I don't know if Volkswagen is, but companies are. So you can see why companies want to collect more data because it's valuable. It's very valuable. So makes sense. Why wouldn't they want to collect it? So we have the three. The companies, the government, and us. And normally there'd be tension and we'd all be fighting and we'd find an equilibrium. But the problem is the us, we don't seem to value privacy. And maybe that's okay. I have no thoughts about that. But I don't think there's a three-way tension. I think with privacy we're losing things that we don't even know we're losing. And it's like the genie out of the bottle. There's no putting it back. Yeah, I don't know where the privacy thing is going to go. I think privacy will actually, Europe, they seem to do it a bit better, probably because of the Nazis and they're very nervous about governments collecting data on people. But in Australia, we are very trusting. So I don't see, in answer to Twitter, and sorry, I hope this is only 172 characters. Have you been counting? Yes. I don't know where we're going to go with privacy. I'm actually a bit nervous about it. I think we will probably lose it, like the Barrier Reef, because we just don't value it. And that may just be the future we have to live in.
Thank you, Richard. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'll end the Q&A session. Thank Richard once again for his responses.
And thank you all.